I assume getting a gauge of what the mood's been this year, given a lot of uncertainties ahead.
Yeah, look, a lot of uncertainties, but I was listening to people talk this morning. It's interesting, there's a lot more people here than prior years, so while I think there are lots of uncertainties, there's still a lot of positivity in the industry as well.
It's been a wild year for the aluminium market.
Look, it absolutely has. I mean, we produce bauxite, alumina and aluminium, so we have, if you like, a part of the whole value chain, and each parts of those value chain have actually moved in slightly different directions this year. Particularly alumina has had a real good pop on price recently.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you as my next question, how are you really capitalising and maximising the benefits from how tight that market is? Yeah,
look, we're quite lucky because we have our own aluminium smelters, but they take about 50% of our production, so we are actually long in alumina, and in a market where it's been incredibly tight over the last 6 months, you know, that's allowed us to actually realise higher prices.
We're just talking about how you spread your travel in terms of client visits across the region. You spend quite a bit of time in China. What's your feel on whether things have changed as the economy slows down and as they really battle this trade situation with the US? Yeah, look, I mean, I think China's economy has evolved over a long period of time. I mean, I would have made the comment 2 years ago, you really start to see the switch between, if you like, all focusing on growth to more sustainable growth, and a lot more of the environmental policies having an impact on what they purchased and how they actually purchased. This year coming into the normal winter cuts, I guess it's going to be interesting to see just how those winter cuts actually fall into play as they try and balance environmental concerns with where the economy's at. Yeah, you've been talking, and I think probably thinking a lot more about how to align your portfolio of assets along with climate change issues, right? What kind of strategy are you taking? What changes do you anticipate on making?
Look, I guess when we think about climate change, we think about it through 3 different dimensions. One is what are the opportunities it presents, and on that side, we're looking at new, if you like, commodities to add to the portfolio. So we've got 18 exploration projects underway, and they're predominantly biased towards base metals because we think in a greener world there's going to be more demand for those products. At the same time, we're doing lots of things about making sure our own operations today are more resilient to climate change, and that ranges from putting in a solar farm up at Cannington to desalination plants at both Hillside and Mozella, 2 smelters in South Africa. And I guess the third piece is just continuing to look at ways that we can actually, if you like, mitigate our current footprint.
Are investors increasingly balking at, I guess, investments that don't necessarily align with that strategy?
Look, I think the whole of society is shifting in expectations. There is no doubt that climate change is real, so we feel that through the ESG investors. We had our AGM last week, and I would have said at least half the questions were centred around climate change and how do we think about that as an organisation. What
do you see moving forward for the aluminium market in terms of demand? Alcoa cutting its expectations, really citing the slowdown in China as one of them. Is that, I guess, a pessimistic view that you share?
Oh, look, we, I guess, think about mining over many cycles. I think one of the benefits we do have is because you have high quality operations, they see prices go up, they see prices go down. So we're very much focused on how we build a sustainable business. So from our perspective, it's about continuing to deliver high quality product to our customers that they want and producing that, if you like, safely at a lowest cost.
What's your forecast for the supply chain for aluminium then going into next year?
Look, we would say there'd be a little bit of slowdown and a bit of tightness on the aluminium side, but I guess on the alumina side where we're long, I still see quite a tight market.
The South African energy coal business, are you able to give us an update on where that's at?
Yeah, look, we're executing exactly to the plan that we spoke about this time roughly 12 months ago. And stage 1 was to actually set up South African Energy Coal as a standalone business. Stage 2 was to start sustainably transforming the ownership of that group. And we've started that process now where we've actually put out expressions of interest, and we've had a number of bidders, express an interest in looking at the business.
Is there any interest in keeping an interest in that business in the medium or long term?
Look, I think the number one focus for us is building something that's sustainable because we've got no plans to exit South Africa, so we want to see an energy coal business that continues to grow and prosper under different ownership.
The Hermosa project in the US, do you have any updates on when that could come to see production?
Yep, I mean, we've been pretty consistent from day one. The focus in the next 12 months is 1, to complete the pre-feasibility study. 2 is to actually get a JORC-compliant, if you like, economic reserve out by the end of the year. And the third piece is to continue the exploration declines, which allow us to actually further understand the ore body.
Do you have further appetite for acquisitions or other assets in North America?
Look, we've got 18 exploration projects underway today, of which a large majority of those are actually based in the Americas, including North America. Probably our most prospective one is the Trilogy project that we have in Alaska. So, yes, a strong interest in continuing to develop.
Do you ever see that being a significant geographic base for the company?
I think over time you would see our base continue to shift where we have a presence in Africa, Australia, and a greater presence in the Americas.
We've been talking this morning, I know, and in a lot of the plenary sessions, there'll be a focus on sustainability and technology and how, a traditional mining sector can kind of bridge that gap. You guys have a partnership with GE, so can you tell us about how that's kind of materialised into benefits for the business?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So we're running a number of different pilot projects with GE at the moment, and it's really about using big data, if you like, in how we use our equipment, how we maintain the equipment, how we know whether up the life cycle. We're also using some of that big data to make sure we can manage our manganese, if you like, ore to market in a much more efficient manner. So we're seeing some really big wins out of that in the early days.
Is there sufficient investment in technology in mining?
Look, I think the industry itself is not as advanced or hasn't been as impacted as big as other parts of the industry, if you like, or if you think about retail, you think about music, we haven't seen that kind of huge change yet, but I think it's coming very rapidly.
As the leader of a business that develops a lot on really the fate of emerging markets and developing markets like China, I'm wondering how much time you spend thinking about the macroeconomic picture.
Yeah, look, we have a centralised marketing function in Singapore. We have a number of people on the ground in China, and there's a lot of work that goes into understanding some of the fundamental drivers. We do something similar in India because we do see India sort of growing at a slower rate and off a smaller base, but also having a strong growth profile.
How would you imagine the company should be tapping into the transition from, the smoke snacking industries in China and the reliance on iron ore, for example, into more of the electric side of things that they're trying to innovate and really push?
Yeah, look, one of the presenters this morning, Tom Butler from the ICMM, spoke very much about, for example, the need for more copper. And, if we think about our exploration projects, they're very much focused towards that bias towards base metals, because we do believe in places like China and India, they're going to create more of a green, if you like, need for many of those commodities which we want to help supply.
In terms of the production pipeline, both for South32, but sort of generally, there's a lot of, concern, or perhaps not concern, expectation that we're going to see upside pressure on commodities prices broadly because of the part of the cycle that we're in production. Do you think there's enough investment in future assets going on?
Look, I think over the last 4 or 5 years there hasn't been a large investment made. Yeah. So I think in that aspect there is going to be a gap, if you like. The supply won't be able to meet demand. And I think that will ultimately trigger some new projects, but also put some upward pressure on prices.
Do you feel like, I know it's day one of the conference, but do you feel like the transition in that mindset from caution to investment and M&A deals heating up has happened?
Look, I would have said 12 to 18 months ago you saw, if you like, a little bit of the bubble come back into the industry where people had excitement, but I think that has tapered slightly over the last 6 months with the trade wars ongoing.
Is the trade war your biggest challenge?
Look, I think the trade war is something that we watch with interest. I think the impact it has on places like China and India and the other issues that are going on there are probably the biggest impacts.